What is going on, everybody? Today we are doing the very first mock draft, or we're doing the entire mock draft. It's our mock draft. We're gonna break it down today. We're gonna go over all 31 picks. Let's jump right into it, man. The Chicago Bears are on the clock. I think this one's a pretty straightforward pick. The Bears could do a lot of different things with this pick, right? They can obviously trade it back. They can obviously just stick with it and take whoever is the number one player on their board. And I know some people are going to say they should take Will Anderson here. He's the best edge defender in this class, which is fact. But you can also get an edge defender in round two. And although there's a drop-off between Will Anderson and the edge defender you're looking at in round two, I think there's a bigger drop-off from the number one defensive tackle to the number one defensive tackle in this class. Generally speaking, Jalen Carter is a difference maker. And for the Bears, you draft a difference maker when you're on the clock at the number one overall pick. And generally speaking, I do think that the top four picks are pretty much set in stone. I think if you put the money that these are the first four guys gone, you're going to likely be correct. Number two, you got the Houston Texans. Obviously, they almost fumbled this pick, but luckily for them, the Bears don't need a quarterback because they found their young quarterback. So at number two, assuming the Bears stick with number one, the Houston Texans are going to take Bryce Young. A lot of people have Young as their number one quarterback, and I do really like Bryce Young as well. For me, he is the best quarterback in this class. I think the Texans do right. Take Bryce Young. Get yourself the quarterback of the future. At number three with the Arizona Cardinals, this is when the draft really begins, right? This is when a team can really decide how they want to kind of build their roster. You know, I almost thought about the Cardinals using a corner with the third overall pick, potentially taking a guy like Devin Witherspoon, who is most people's number one cornerback. He is my number one cornerback, but right now I think Will Anderson is going to be the pick for the Cardinals, and the reason why is because when you look at a guy with bend, twitchiness, explosiveness, a guy who hasn't reached his full potential, a guy who could become a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL, you just don't pass that up. So for me, right now, the Arizona Cardinals take Will Anderson Jr. I think it is the correct pick. And I think that, again, that's where the draft really begins, because they could go a couple of different directions, obviously, right? Now, the Colts, obviously the team that could potentially trade up and get the number one pick with the Bears. There's a chance they may swap picks. I don't think it's going to cost as much as some people are saying it's going to cost. I know the value aspect of it is massive, but I don't think it's going to cost nearly what some people think it would cost. But for the purposes of this video, we're not doing any trades. The Colts with the number 4 pick, in my opinion, I think they take a quarterback. You can't do anything in this league without a good quarterback. And I think Jalen Hurts as well as Patrick Mahomes kind of proved that yesterday. And there's not a bigger cheat code in the NFL than a rookie quarterback's contract, right? So I think the Indianapolis Colts take a quarterback, and I know it's going to be between Will Levis, CJ Stroud, and I think Anthony Richardson's definitely in play as well here. I'm going to go ahead and say they take CJ Stroud. Right now I have Stroud number 2, right after Bryce Young number 1. For me, Will Levis is actually not even the third quarterback. I think AR-15, Anthony Richardson, is the better quarterback. I am not very high on Will Levis. We'll obviously see as the combine kind of comes and the draft process continues where these guys kind of get ranked. The Seattle Seahawks pick is going to be very interesting as well, because technically they don't have to pay Geno Smith, who's going to want over $25 million this year. They could obviously roll forward and take a lineman here. They can take an edge defender here. Their defensive line is good, but it's not great. Last year, they paid Nwosu Uchenna, who, in my opinion, if you let him be a full-time starter, he's going to be a very good football player. Even guys like Poona Ford and Al Woods and Shelby Harris are good defensive linemen. In my opinion, although you could say, should they take a cornerback? Should they take a secondary player? Should they take an offensive tackle? Now, I shouldn't say offensive tackle, right? That wouldn't make sense. They took 2 offensive tackles last year. They would take a guard, right? And at this point, with the number 5 overall pick, you don't take a guard. That's way too high. It could be Quentin Nelson on the board. You don't do that, right? Now, obviously, they took a cornerback in the draft last year in Tarek Woolen. Even Kobe Bryant, both guys are really good football players. For me, I think the pick right now, what makes the most sense is going to be a defensive end. Again, I don't even think they really need a defensive end. I think the Seahawks team is very stacked. To be honest, if the Seahawks really wanted to take that next step and continue their build, I think they should take a quarterback here, but I don't think they're going to do it. And I say they should take a quarterback because a quarterback's contract is a cheat code. In this instance, for the Seahawks, you get a rookie quarterback, you don't pay Geno Smith. That means you can now focus on the secondary and maybe signing a guy like Jalen Ramsey. Maybe you go get a linebacker that's a top 5 linebacker. Maybe you go get Daron Payne and he absolutely changes your entire defensive front, right? But for me, with the 5th pick overall, you're taking the best defensive end available at the moment, and that is Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, a guy who has great size, very strong, very powerful. I think he fits right in with what the Seahawks have already started to kind of build with Al Woods. Massive body, massive frame. Poona Ford is very strong. Shelby Harris is very strong. Just put another strong piece on that defense line, and that defense line is going to be very hard to block. Obviously, right now they do run that base 34 front, but you know you're not really going to play a 34 defense long term, right? You're going to play nickel a lot. You'll play dime a lot. So for me, Tyree Wilson fits right in. The Detroit Lions, man, this one's going to be an interesting pick because the Detroit Lions have 2 picks. They have the 6th pick and they have the 18th pick. I think there is a chance they can swap this pick with a team like the Panthers to jump in front of the Raiders and the Falcons, who may both want a quarterback, and I think that would be a smart thing for the Lions to do. What do the Lions need? Right? They don't need a quarterback. They don't need offensive line. I don't even think they need anything on offense. Maybe they can get a wide receiver at this point if they really wanted to. Maybe you get a cornerback, right? I know a lot of people have Myles Murphy kind of just going to the Lions. I don't like that pick, to be honest with you guys. I think Myles Murphy is a little overrated, and for me, if you're the Detroit Lions with pick 6, you're getting yourself the best cornerback in the draft that's available. To me, again, that's going to be Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. Number 6, the Detroit Lions take Devin Witherspoon. Number 7, the pick. The Raiders are on the clock, man. This one's going to be very interesting because I think every team that's out there is looking at Aaron Rodgers, including the Raiders. Every Raider fan is looking at Aaron Rodgers. Every Falcons fan is looking at Aaron Rodgers. Every Panthers fan and Commanders and Jets. Every fan out there that needs a quarterback is looking at Aaron Rodgers. Is Aaron Rodgers actually going to go to the Raiders? Maybe. It's definitely a possibility. In my opinion, the Raiders should not wait on Aaron Rodgers. They should go ahead and just take a quarterback, and they should build around that quarterback. Yes, Devontae Adams may not be happy if the Raiders take a quarterback here. Some of the players on the offense might not want to wait a year or 2 for a quarterback to fully develop. But I think for the Raiders, you take the quarterback now and you build the depth, right? You have interior defensive line issues. You have linebacker issues. You have cornerback and safety issues. You got to get a rookie contract quarterback. And for me, Anthony Richardson is my number 3 quarterback. I am taking him if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders. I know some people are going to say, why would you take Richardson over Will Levis? Again, I don't think Will Levis is going to be a really good quarterback. Obviously, maybe things shift as the draft season approaches, as we get more tape of Levis. I just don't think his style of game is, long-term going to be what the NFL is about. I think Anthony Richardson is where the NFL is headed. Now, obviously, he's not a complete quarterback today. He has to continue to develop. But he's definitely headed that way. Plus, you always got to keep in mind, Florida didn't have the same receivers, the same linemen that a team like, let's say, Ohio State, right, or C.J. Stroud may have had. So, for me, if you swap Richardson and C.J. Stroud, how much more success does Richardson have and how much less success does C.J. Stroud have, right? You always got to think about college versus the NFL. Sometimes stats lie a little bit, and I think with Anthony Richardson, the potential is through the roof. The Falcons, another very interesting team. Obviously, the Falcons could potentially use a quarterback. And if Will Levis is there, I think they're going to be very, very interested in taking Will Levis. But I think the smart thing for the Falcons to do would be to really think about maybe an edge defender at this point. Maybe continue building that defensive line. Maybe draft a linebacker. Or, in my opinion, I think what would be smart for the Falcons at this point is to take the best overall defensive player available at this point. The guy that I think could be an absolute game changer is Alabama's safety slash nickel cornerback Brian Branch. And I think it's very important to put that label out there. He's not just a true safety. The guy's a defensive player. Think Javon Holland, right? A guy that can play free safety, strong safety, split safety, post safety, whatever type of safety it is, and then drop into the nickel position and play that role as well, defend the run. Brian Branch is my pick for the Falcons. They also took a defensive end last year in Arnold Ebiketie. A lot of people write him off. I think he's going to be a great football player. So for me, I think Brian Branch makes sense. I don't think they should focus on defensive end. I don't think they really need offensive weapons either. They have a really, really good set of offensive weapons. Plus, I think you let the quarterback develop a little bit, right? Let Ridler develop, see what he has next year. And if he's not it after 1 year of him starting, maybe you have another top 7 pick and you get a quarterback in next year's draft. I don't think this makes a lot of sense. Panthers, everybody agrees the Panthers are one of the better teams. They'll obviously be in the Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers sweepstake, but I think for the Panthers, if Will Levis is there, and if it's not Will Levis, maybe it's a different quarterback, but in this mock draft, Will Levis is there. I think for them, they take quarterback Will Levis out of Kentucky. I think it's a good fit for the Panthers. They obviously have a need at quarterback. They have a lot of weapons on offense, good O-line, great left tackle, or at least potential left tackle. I'm going to give the Panthers Will Levis. Number 10, you got the Super Bowl losers as of yesterday, but a team that has everything stacked. Like, in my opinion, this Eagles team is 100% stacked. I know some people say they should take Bijan Robinson and make their offense even better, but I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, I think that O-line is so great that a guy like Kenneth Gainswell can take over and have just the same type of impact that Miles Sanders had. Maybe not the exact same, they're different type of runners, but I don't think a running back makes sense for the Eagles. Plus, I don't think Hausman is the type of guy to make those picks, right? I'm sorry, Howie Roseman is not the type of guy to make those picks, right? For me, if I'm the Falcons, what could you do right now to make your team so much better? I think you got to focus on the defense. You're going to lose, most likely, right? Gardner Johnson, you're going to lose Javon Hargrave. You may lose other guys as well, right? Guys that are potentially their last year unless they take super cheap contracts. You got to look to build the future. And right now, I think there's a guy on the board that has a lot of upside, right? And that's going to be edge defender out of Iowa, Lucas Van Ness. He's a guy that I know some people will say at 10th. Does that make sense? I'm going to say yes. I think Lucas Van Ness is a guy that can play inside and outside. And the Eagles have loved using versatile defensive players. So I'm taking him. Number 11, you got the Tennessee Titans. I think this one's a very straightforward pick for the Titans. Last year, you find your tackle in Nicholas Petit. This year, you got to get another tackle because Taylor Lewan has shown us that he can't stay healthy. And I know a lot of people are kind of projecting the Titans take a tackle. And I know it's not the sexiest pick, to be honest with you guys, but I think it's the right pick. And this year is going to be interesting because there are some tackles that some people are saying should not go in the first round that may end up in the first round, right? Guys like Broderick Jones previously would not have been a first round pick. But this draft class isn't the deepest. So with that being said, there's going to be guys that would have been second round picks that go in the first round. For me, the Titans should play it safe and take Peter Skoronski. In my opinion, Skoronski is the best tackle, and I do think he's going to play tackle long term. He is obviously a left tackle in college. I think he's a plug-and-play starter, and I do think he's the best tackle in this class. Again, I'm not as high on Paris Johnson. Again, I think in 2 years ago, if you look at that draft, I think Paris Johnson would have been like the 7th tackle in that draft, right? The draft with Rashawn Slater and Penei Sewell. I think he would have been ranked as like, maybe not 7th, but he would have been ranked as like the 5th or 6th tackle in that class. The tackle class isn't very deep here. Let's go ahead and get into the next pick. You got the Houston Texans on the clock. Previously, they take a quarterback. I think they're going to pair up a receiver to go with that quarterback. And it's going to be interesting to see which receiver ends up going first. Some people have Quentin Johnston. Some people have Zay Flowers. Some people have Jackson Smith in the Jigba. And other people have Jordan Addison at a USC. For me, I think the best receiver in this class is Jackson Smith in Jigba. And I think he's going to go the highest as well. So I think the Texans get a receiver in the Jigba. And I think he's going to end up proving to be the best receiver in this class. Sometimes people overthink these type of things, man. The New York Jets are on the clock. The Jets obviously have a bunch of needs. Quarterback's probably their biggest need. They may need a tackle. They may need a linebacker. They could probably use a bunch of different picks. Receiver, right? To really, assuming they go out and get a quarterback, and we're going to make that assumption that they either get Derek Carr, we're going to assume, or Aaron Rodgers, or maybe Tom Brady comes back. And if it's not one of those guys, maybe they go after Geno Smith and Jacoby Brissett. I don't think they're going to draft the quarterback at this point. With that being said, I think they're going to end up taking a tackle, and we're going to go ahead and give them Paris Johnson Jr., who is still on the clock, or I'm sure he's still available. Again, a little bit of a developmental piece, but I think this is a good fit for them. Number 14, the New England Patriots also may need a tackle, but I think when certain guys kind of slip a little bit, I don't think the Patriots care much about need. I think the Patriots always will look at the individual players that are kind of available on the clock. And with pick 14, and you can say this is kind of a need for them, right? Their quarterback obviously is about to enter a pivotal year, his third year. But you got to get him some weapons. And the Patriots obviously last year took a guard in the first round. They have a good D-line. They have a, generally speaking, good defense. They have a quarterback that needs weapons. And for me, I think the Patriots aren't the type to draft running backs high. But I don't see why they wouldn't take a receiver high. And right now, I think Jordan Addison could add a lot of value for the New England Patriots. Gives Mac Jones that weapon, right? The Green Bay Packers pick 15. They could obviously use a lot of different things, right? They may need a new quarterback as well. We'll see what ends up happening. Some people don't like Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love is a good quarterback, and I think at the very least, you give Jordan Love the opportunity, right? Right now, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock, and I don't know if they would draft this guy if he's there, but I think with where this guy's kind of projected to where he's at right now at pick 15, I think the Packers are going to take him. That's going to be Myles Murphy. I think Myles Murphy for the Packers makes sense because the Packers are the type of defense that can develop a guy. So I'm going to go ahead and give them Myles Murphy. Again, even with pick 15, I will say I don't even know if Myles Murphy goes that high. I'm just not sold on him. I don't think he shows the pass rush skills to be a top 6 pick, which is where a lot of people kind of have him going. Then you got the Washington Commanders. The Commanders obviously will be in it for a quarterback. The Commanders are obviously a little interesting because some people would say, do they take a tackle? And I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, I'm very high on Sam Cosmi. I think Samuel Cosmi is one of the best tackles in the NFL. And I know he hasn't really proven it yet. Going into this third year, I think it's going to be a pivotal year for him. But when I watch him, when I watch his technique, the guy looks very, very, very good. Again, what do the Commanders need? Do they need tackles? I'm going to say no. And if you're not taking a tackle in the first round, I don't know if a center or guard is really worth it. Unless the guys like Creed Humphrey, and even then Creed Humphrey still slipped to the second round. So I would stay away from offensive line. They've drafted a receiver last year in the first round, and in Jahan Dotson, you already had Terry McLaurin. To me, maybe you focus on the defense. Maybe if you do pay a quarterback like Rodgers or Carr, you may need to let some of your free agents go. Guys like Daron Payne may not be able to be re-signed. So I think the Commanders would be smart to continue to shore up that defensive line. I think a guy that has a lot of upside is going to be Brian Breeze. Now, do want to just look at some of the guys and talk a little bit about them. I think Sieki Ika is also a very, very interesting prospect, but I don't know if he's worth the 16th overall pick. Another guy, Kalijah Kancey, I would say he's worth the 16th overall pick, but I don't think he's a good fit for the Commanders necessarily. But I think Brian Brees is a great fit for the Commanders, so I'm going to go ahead and slot him in there. Then you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if there's ever been a team that needs tackle help, it is, I shouldn't even say tackle, offensive line help, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So for me, I'm going to give the Steelers, who I think is the best tackle overall in this class. He's a guy who you guys can see obviously is being projected right now as a high second round pick, but he's a guy that I think as the mock draft season continues, he's going to start being projected as a first round pick. In fact, we're already seeing it in Darnell Wright, but the guy's a true day one starter, right tackle, left tackle, wherever you want to start him. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Steelers. They got to protect their young quarterback. They got to open up some lanes for their young running back. You could take a wide receiver. You can definitely make that case here, but I think there's some good receivers to be had in the later rounds. For me, I think O-line's a little bit more important. Back to the Detroit Lions. Earlier, the Lions took cornerback Devin Witherspoon with the 6th overall pick. With this pick, it's going to be interesting because if Bijan Robinson is there, and I know you have a young running back already, but how crazy would it be to have that 1-2 punch with arguably a generational running back, right? That's definitely something to kind of think about, kind of consider. Obviously, I don't think they're going to do it. In my opinion, they're definitely not going to do it. But I think the Detroit Lions could think about some things to kind of add here, right? Last year, you go out and get Aiden Hutchinson. In the past, you've drafted some, you haven't focused enough, in my opinion, on the second level, right? You drafted some corners. I think about 3 years ago was Jeff Okudah. I believe it was 3 years ago. You obviously took a corner with the 6th overall pick. I don't think defensive line is as much of a need. I think guys like Ali McNeil, Isaiah Buggs could maybe develop into something. And then obviously you got Aiden Hutchinson. I think they should take a linebacker. I think it's a position you haven't really focused on if you're the Lions, and I think there's one linebacker that is worthy of a top 20 pick. That is going to be Clemson's Trenton Simpson. He is the best linebacker in this class, great in coverage. And I think the Lions need to definitely focus more on coverage as opposed to run defense. Although run defense is important, the Lions are going to average like 28 points a game this year. Like they're going to be a top 6 to 7 offense. And I think you have to focus on coverage. You have to focus on potentially playing with the lead. So for me, with the Lions pick, I am taking Trenton Simpson. Now you got the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers pick is going to be interesting because there is, at least in my opinion, one quarterback to be had at this pick, which is Hendon Hooker. I'm not going to do it, but I am tempted to do it. And I know some people are going to say, why would you take Hendon Hooker so high? You know, if a guy pre-injury is a top 15 pick, I don't know why an injury would force him to now be like a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. To me, that doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, the Buccaneers still have Kyle Trask. I think they would be smart just rolling forward with him. Obviously, assuming Tom Brady actually retires. But I do think the Buccaneers could use some help on the defensive side. For me, I think they need to take an edge defender. I think they need to really focus on getting after the quarterback. And continue that defense, right? Obviously, you have some young linebackers. All right, you have one young linebacker. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him, though. But then you have some other depth pieces that can maybe step in. But what they need to do is absolutely get a guy opposite of Barrett, and they need a guy that can get after the quarterback. So for me right now, I think with pick 19, you take Will McDonald. He's a true day one starter. He's a plug-and-play starter. You get that guy to get after the quarterback. I love McDonald. I think he's the most underrated player in this class. Then you got the Seattle Seahawks. Back to the Seahawks. With their first pick, they took Tyree Wilson. Here, I think you can really consider taking a guard, taking a center. But I'm not going to do it still. I do like Osiris Torrance out of Florida, but I also like Gabe Jackson and Phil Haynes and Damian Lewis. I think those 3 guys are still good. I don't know if it's worth with the 20th pick to take that position. I think a guy that could fit right in with the Seahawks, and this is a guy that's going to be a little bit different because the Seahawks don't have this type of guy. The Seahawks have a lot of strength. They don't have a lot of speed on their defensive line. And I think a guy like Kalijah Kancey comes in day one, and he would be their best pass rusher on the defensive line. And again, the Seahawks don't need to get a whole lot, right? They don't need to do a whole lot. They have a good set, in my opinion, they have a top 10 offensive line, especially kind of projecting out, right? I think they do the 20, you guys can see here, the Miami Dolphins obviously forfeited their pick. So the 21 pick now is going to be the Chargers. What do the Chargers need? I think the Chargers need some help on the offensive side. Uh, there's a chance Keelan Allen gets cut for the Chargers. And you got to look to replace production. And I think Quentin Johnston gives the Chargers, specifically Justin Herbert, another option, a guy he can throw it up to. So I'm going to take him. Now the Ravens are on the clock. What do the Ravens do? You may need to take an edge defender. You may need to take a wide receiver. You may even need to take a quarterback. Like, let's not rule that out, that the Ravens take a quarterback and Lamar Jackson ends up walking. Either way, it's going to be interesting what they end up doing. The Ravens did take David Ajabo last year. He's a guy that I think they should 100% start him right away, let him be. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on the edge defenders as much if I'm the Ravens. Maybe they get a cornerback. Maybe the Baltimore Ravens end up taking a corner, and with a bunch of corners still on the board, I think this makes a lot of sense for them. You have a lot of cap invested on the corners. You got to get cheaper. Marcus Peters may end up getting cut, which means a guy like Christian Gonzalez can fit right in. A guy who has good length, arm length, has good hip fluidity. I love the pick for the Baltimore Ravens to take a cornerback in Christian Gonzalez. Then you got the Minnesota Vikings, an interesting pick. What would the Vikings do with this pick? Can they go O-line? Maybe. Can they go defense? Maybe. Personally, I think they should go all in on the defense. Obviously, the Vikings could potentially get a quarterback as well. I know a lot of Vikings fans are over Kirk Cousins, but I don't know if I would I don't know if I would 100% take a quarterback at pick 23. I think you got to have a top 10 pick to get a quarterback. It's risky, right? So for me, if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I am taking corner Joey Porter Jr. Some people had him projected as a top 10 pick earlier in the draft season. He slipped a little bit as Devin Witherspoon's kind of risen. Kind of an interesting pick. Then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that's come out of nowhere, right, and absolutely crushed it. The Jags can go a bunch of different ways, right? They can take an offensive lineman. They can take a defensive back. They can take another linebacker here, potentially, right? They do have some good linebackers already on the roster. They took 2 rookies last year. They can go a whole bunch of different directions. I think they should focus on the offensive side. In my opinion, with pick 24, if Bijan Robinson is there, I think you take him. And I know some people are going to say, are you sure you take a running back in the first round? Yes, you take this running back in the first round. Yes, you got Travis Etienne. He's a really good football player. But what Etienne is not is he's not a full every down running back, right? Etienne's explosive. You get him out in space, right? You run the football a lot, 25 times a game, and you split the carries. You split Robinson and Etienne. And again, I think the best thing the Jags can do is get Trevor Lawrence as many weapons as possible. You could get a receiver. Obviously, they got Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, assuming he's brought back next year. You got a lot of different pieces already on the offensive side. I think Bijan Robinson makes a whole lot of sense. I'm taking him because of the fact that I think there's a big difference between him and the next best wide receiver in terms of playmaking abilities. 100% taking him. Then you got the Giants. What do the Giants do? I think they can go a lot of different directions. To me, if the Giants have picked 25, they're a team that could potentially use a linebacker. They're a team that could potentially use a cornerback or a safety, although I do like the safeties that they have on the roster. If I am the New York Giants, I'm going to focus in on a defensive end. They do have some good defensive ends. They obviously took one with, what was it, the 6th pick, I believe, last year. But I think having 3 really good defensive ends makes a massive difference for a team, right? I think the Giants have to focus in the trenches. And if there's guys like Nolan Smith and BJ Ojulari still available, I think you have to take one of these guys. I think Nolan Smith would be the pick here. I think he kind of fits the mold of what the Giants already kind of want to do. Then you got the Dallas Cowboys. This one's going to be interesting because I think a lot of people have them taking an interior offensive lineman in Osiris Torrance. Although I think that's an interesting pick, I'm not going to give them a guard. Instead, I'm going to give them a wide receiver. I literally did this in my mock draft as well. I think if there's a team out there that needs weapons, I think the Dallas Cowboys are one of those teams. Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee, I think, is a first-round pick. If he falls to pick 26, which may happen, the Cowboys should take him. You got CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard will be brought back. Ezekiel Elliott may or may not come back, right? It just depends on what the Cowboys want to do with him and his contract. You got to add weapons for Dak Prescott. The Cowboys already have a top 10 offensive line. They already have a top 10 defensive line. You don't have to focus on the trenches if you're the Cowboys. Get some weapons. That's how you're going to ultimately win. You didn't lose to the Niners because your guys' trenches failed. You lost to the Niners because you couldn't score enough points. Jalen Hyatt is another player that you can bring in who'll have success. Here comes pick 27. Bills have to get weapons as well, right? I think they're a really good team. I think they have everything going for themselves already. Yes, you can probably take a guard, but what's more important? A receiver, a running back, a tight end, or a guard, right? Let's be honest. You could take a guy like Nathaniel Dell, Nathan Dell, whose stock is rising, right? He's shorter, but his stock has been going insane. You could take a running back in Jamari Gibbs. You can take a tight end in Michael Mayer or Zach Flowers, right? There's a lot of different ways you can kind of go. I think you got to add a weapon, though, if you're the Bills, right? You got to get more playmakers. Yeah, you can kind of focus on the defense if you want, right? You can get a corner or a safety. I'm taking Michael Mayer if I am the Buffalo Bills. I think they got to, in my opinion, I think they got to add more weapons, and I think Mayer is a guy who is a true first-round pick. I know they have a tight end already there in Knox. I don't know. I think you can maybe use 2 tight ends. Maybe you run the football a little bit more. Maybe you don't. Just throw the ball as much as the Bills do. One of the things that the Bills and the team like the Chiefs sometimes do, and the Chiefs stopped doing it this year, and I don't want to say it the way it's about to come out, but you got to sustain drives, right? Sometimes the Bills will throw the ball 3 times. They'll go 3 and out. And I know it doesn't happen a whole lot, but it does happen. And I think sometimes you got to be a little bit more consistent with kind of keeping drives a little bit longer. If I'm the Bills, pick 27, I think a tight end makes a lot of sense. The Cincinnati Bengals may have to replace T. Higgins. They may not have the money for him. Justin Herbert's going to get paid. Jamar Chase is going to get paid. Tyler Boyd already has a contract. They'll probably move on from him at some point as well. The Bengals are an interesting team. Now, obviously, Jesse Bates is up for a contract. I don't think they're going to sign him. I don't think they're going to be able to pay Jesse Bates. And they do already have his replacement. I think it was last year in the first round. Don't quote me. May have been second round. But I believe it was the end of the first round. They took Dax Hill, right, out of Michigan. And I think he's going to be the Jesse Bates replacement. But maybe they can use a corner, because I do think that Bengals front seven's really stacked. Or maybe they can use another wide receiver. Maybe you got to replace the production of T. Higgins. If there's somehow Quentin Johnston's available, maybe they take him because it's very similar in size to T. Higgins. Maybe you still take another wide receiver. It's going to be very interesting what the Bengals end up doing. Now, some people will say maybe they take a tackle or a guard. I don't think that makes sense. I know Leo Collins was already paid. Jonah Williams, I think he's up for a contract. Don't quote me on that. I don't think they've signed him yet. So you may need another tackle. And if that's the case, you draft the tackle here. Broderick Jones, Anton Harrison are still available. But, again, I'm going to not take a tackle at this pick. I think a cornerback makes a lot of sense for the Bengals. To me, when you're a team like the Bengals, you're expected to score a high number of points. With Cam Smith, Eli Ricks, and Keely Ringo available, you have a bunch of corners that you may be able to take. I'm going to take the Georgia corner. I know PFF has Cam Smith ranked higher, but I think Keely Ringo is better. I'm going to take him. I think he would be a day 1 starter for the Bengals. I love the pick. Then you got the New Orleans Saints. What could the Saints use? In my opinion, they could probably use a corner as well. Maybe a interior defensive lineman. Potentially, you guys can look at which interior guys are available. Sieki Ika is there. Mozzie Smith, Canu Benton. A lot of people love this guy. Kind of interesting, right? Obviously, I think after the top 2 or 3 guys, I think it's very difficult in terms of that position. So I'm not going to take a interior defensive lineman. for the Saints. And keep in mind, we are assuming the Saints do end up getting Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers. So with this pick, I think a guard may end up making sense in Osiris Torrance. If he's available with pick 29, he may not be. He's a guy that I think is a top 10 player in this class. But again, guard's just not that important. But you may take a guy like Osiris Torrance. Maybe you plug him in at left guard. Maybe you plug him in at right guard. It really depends which of your guards you think is better. I think Cesar Ruiz is the better guard. Obviously, that's my opinion. But I think the Saints could use an interior guy. So for me, I think that makes a whole lot of sense for them. Then you got the Eagles, once again, pick 30. Keep in mind, last time we had them taking a edge defender. This time, we're going to have them taking a safety. I don't think the Eagles have bad football players in the backfield. I just don't know if they're going to be able to pay all of their guys that they already have. Antonio Johnson right now is ranked number 30. Sidney Brown is another guy. Just kind of keep an eye on him. I think he's going to rise up the draft board. But I'm going to go ahead and take Antonio Johnson. I do think he's the second best safety in this class. Finally, the Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, pick 31. What do the Chiefs need? Let's be honest. They have a top 5 offensive line. They have pretty good receivers and tight ends. I don't think they really have any issue there. I think they should just continue to focus on the defense. Last year, they took a defensive end. I think at this point, you're really picking and choosing what you want. You could go corner. You could go safety. And really just look over the board of who you want. For me, I think a a great football player, right? And a big need for this team is going to be a linebacker. And I say that knowing Nick Bolton's a really good football player, but I'm also saying that what else do the Super Bowl champions really need? Like, you could take an interior defensive lineman, you could take another edge defender, or you can get a second level defender. And for me, I'm taking Drew Sanders. There you guys have it, man. The 31 picks this year. You guys can see it right there. What do you guys think about this, man? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys are still watching up to this point, let me know in the comments. Give me some sort of grade or indicator that you guys watched it up to this point. I'm gonna hit you guys up, man. I'm gonna get you guys some sort of jersey, whatever team it is. But don't say it. Don't say we're getting you guys a jersey or anything like that, because I don't want I don't want people who didn't watch this video to start saying it as well. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed. We're going to be doing mock drafts for all the teams, going over some NFL draft news, some risers, fallers, all that stuff. So thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.